We send our kids to school to get taught maths, English and science. Not this stuff. It has to stop. Hi, my name's Red Down. I'm a vicar in the Church of England. Not only a vicar, but a parent. So this concerns me on two fronts. It's what our children are being taught, some would say indoctrinated, in our schools about gender ideology, sex at such a young age. I have a 15-year-old boy at secondary school and an 8-year-old girl at primary school. It is concerning. I speak so much to my son to find out what what's being taught to him, drilled into him in his school, and it is quite worrying. What's quite worrying is when he says to me, I can't say anything back because if I do, I feel that, I'll get suspended or anything. We all have to go along with what they're saying. They don't really take it in, but they're trying to push it into them. So obviously, as a Christian, as a vicar, it is concerning. We believe as Christians that God created man and woman and that sex is for marriage. That's what marriage was created for, to have sex intimately and beautifully and to raise children in that marriage. We understand it doesn't always happen that way, but we also understand that the world outside of the Christian faith thinks very differently. But I think the world at the moment is kind of not too happy about what's going on in our schools. Now I'm going to look at the first thing here. It's the World Health Organization. This is the World Health Organization putting a report out to Europe. Doesn't concern us in Great Britain and Northern Ireland, thank God, but it is quite concerning. It's on our doorstep. Listen to this. The headline in the paper is Fury over World Health Organization Sex Education about early childhood masturbation and gender identities for under fours. For under fours, people. The article goes on to say the World Health Organization has been urged to withdraw disturbing guidance to schools about sexuality education for young children. Children under 4 should ask questions about sexuality. Where this comes from, I have no idea. And explore gender identities at this age. Why are we sexualizing our children at this age? Not even at this age, as they get older, but under 4, according to a detailed WHO report aimed at policymakers across Europe. So this is the World Health Organization. World Health. I always thought this organization would be looking at health, how we can not get ill, how can we make ourselves better. But now, gender ideologies and sexualization of children. The official guidance, it says, also supports providing information to children under 4 about enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's own body, early childhood masturbation. This is demonic. I would say, from my perspective, why would this come to children under 4? Under 4, how can people teach kids under 4 about early childhood masturbation? It's vile. It really is. And they should also learn skills to gain an awareness of gender identity. I mean, like, kids at this age, they're playing with their imaginations, and they play princesses and they play army. I remember playing army when I was a kid, and you live in a fantasy land. To then try to say you're a different gender to what you are born with is yeah. The article goes on. The same WHO report states children aged between 4 and 6 years should talk about sexual matters and consolidate their gender identity. No, just no. Talk about sexual matters. I mean, like, it's difficult enough talking to your teenager about sexual matters, let alone these who don't. Why? Again, it comes back to why are we sexualizing children at this age? Let the kids be kids and consolidate their gender identity. It's consolidated right at the point of conception. It's there. But the article goes on to say right at the end about the UK, a government spokesman said, the government does not recognise this WHO guidance and we don't agree with its recommendations, thank God. We have not distributed or promoted it to our schools. Then they say, we offer our own guidance to how schools teach children and young people about relationships and health. So let's look at the result of their guidance. By the way, we can't really see guidance as parents because schools won't let us see it. But we can see the results. A damning report finds 1 in 10 children want to change their gender or have already done so. Almost a third of teenagers being taught that a woman can have a penis. So this comes from a report from Civitas entitled Show and Tell and Leave Nothing to the Imagination. How Critical Social Justice is Undermining British Schooling by Joanne Nadler, coming out this month. It's quite worrying, folks. Let's get into this article, and this is about the UK. This is taken from a survey done of children. 1 in 10 children want to change their gender or have already done so, a damning report has found. It's quite worrying. 1 in 10 children. Teenagers are questioning their biological sex and are exposed to woke sex education material. It has been revealed last night. This is when this came out. Almost a third are being taught that women can have a penis, while 1 in 5 had been told that a man can get pregnant. The report by think tank Civitas found. You know, what? How do they get marked in biology? They're doing biology. Literally, kids this week are sitting down for their GCSEs. They're doing biology. And so how can you get a question right when you say a woman can have a penis and a man can get pregnant? They're teaching, just teach kids what they're supposed to be taught, not this nonsense. So the article goes on to say, the findings sparked outrage from MPs and parents who said children were being used as a psychological and social experiment. Tory MP Miriam Cates, a former teacher and member of the Commons Education Committee, and pray for this MP. She really steps out and stands up against this. She said, what is happening in our schools under the guise of sex education is a population level psychological and social experiment on our children. This cannot go on. It cannot go in. It's messing up our children. The report polled 1,168 young people aged 16 to 18. More than half, 54%, said they knew someone at their school who wants to change gender or already had. So the awareness of those others changing gender or already had in schools is over half the children knowing it. So they're kind of speaking about it. It's quite open. It's not anything that's hidden here. This is an ideology that's got into schools that's being really lived out here, and it's affecting our young children. 1 in 10% said they want to change their gender or had already done so. That's 1 in 10 children want to change their gender or already done so. I saw something, an article or something I read said, I don't know how many, 10, 20 years ago it was 250, and now it's 1 in 10. In total for the year, 250. So here's a kind of a brief overview of questions that were asked. What have 16 to 18-year-olds been taught in schools? What have they been taught? Sex assigned at birth, 67%. Sex assigned at birth. Again, you're going to fail your biology exam. A woman can have a penis. This is what they believe, 32%. A man can get pregnant, 20%. Britain is a racist country, 42%. And young men are currently a problem for society, 41%. And we know where all this is coming from. This is the ideology coming from the States. I remember growing up as a kid, and they always said, you know, fashion and things coming up from the States would always catch up with us over in Europe a year or 2 years later. And this is, you know, talk about Britain as a racist country, young men are the problem of society. That's what's happened over there. And now we're having that, and it's going to, you know, all the work that's been done, especially on racism, is being undone by this ideology. And 42% believing it is a racist country is really sad. It's now that, you know, that we have many different people from many different countries living here. So the report goes on to say, it's quite depressing. The report also found that of the 1,097 parents of 12 to 16-year-olds polled, almost 8 in 10, 77%, want the legal right to see all sex and relationship education materials. Of course we did. A legal right. It shouldn't even have to be a legal right. Schools should just be telling us. It's amid an urgent review ordered by Rishi Sunak into the inappropriate and graphic material taught to youngsters in schools nationwide, which there are. What's being taught and shown to our youngsters is quite frightening.
Graphic lessons on oral sex, how to choke your partner safely, and 72 genders. This is what passes for relationships and sex education in British schools. Across the country, children are being subjected to lessons that are age inappropriate, extreme, sexualising and inaccurate, often using resources from unregulated organisations that are actively campaigning to undermine parents. This is not a victory for equality, it is a catastrophe for childhood. Will my right honourable friend honour his commitment to end inappropriate sex education by commissioning an independent inquiry into the nature and extent of this safeguarding scandal?
Can I say I share my honourable friend's concerns and thank her for her work in this area. That's why I've asked the Department for Education to ensure that schools are not teaching inappropriate or contested content in RSHE. Our priority should always be the safety and well-being of children, and schools should also make curriculum content and materials available to parents. As a result of all of this, we are bringing forward a review of RSHE statutory guidance, and we'll start our consultation as soon as possible.
Our youngsters are being indoctrinated in our school, being taught this, and here's some more effects from another article. All the articles are linked below, by the way. Children allowed to self-declare gender at nearly half our schools. And here's the scary part. Parents kept in the dark as teachers increasingly turn to external agencies that promote controversial and contested beliefs, warns report. That means your child could be going to school dressing up in the opposite sex, being called a different name and affirmed in that by the school, then dressing as their actual gender and returning home, and you don't know anything about it as a parent. How does that make you feel? This article says nearly half of secondary schools are allowing children to self-declare their gender without parental consent, an investigation has found. Freedom of information requests to more than 300 state secondary schools in England have found that 40% are allowing children to self-declare their gender. Now, I don't know if all of them would allow children to dress up differently, or even any of them. I know that happens in the States, but it could happen here. But you don't know because you're not allowed to know. So I could speculate about England. I know it happens in other countries. The research by think tank Politics Change also found that 30% of schools are failing to inform their designated safeguarding lead when a child wishes to change gender. And this is really important. This is safeguarding risks. There could be other things going on, and it needs to be referred to designated safeguarding lead. And 30% of schools are failing to do this. Safeguarding is so important. Our children are being failed in preference to ideologies, and safeguarding is there to protect them, but it should not trump ideologies. The report claims that the practice of affirming a child's feelings of gender distress, where a child thinks there's a mismatch between their biological sex and their gender identity, has become embedded within the classroom. Meaning secondary schools are effectively facilitating medical interventions on site. According to the report, only 28% of schools said that they would reliably inform a parent as soon as a child disclosed that they were questioning their gender. 28%. So just under a third of the schools. So you got children going to school? They're not going to tell you. Percentage-wise, a third will not tell you. Freedom of information responses collected by Policy Exchange show that 72% of secondary schools are now teaching that people have a gendered identity that may be different from their biological sex. So nearly 3/4 of our schools are teaching that people have a different gender identity that are different from their biological sex. And we trust our teachers to teach maths, English and science. My son goes to an old boys school, And he came back and told me one day that he got taught that he could be any sex or any gender that he wanted, just by choice in that sense. And yet he goes to a boys' school where all the teachers, all the staff call them boys. They call them boys. We even get letters saying boys. And yet, how messed up is this? While 25% are teaching that some people or children may be born in the wrong body. It's really worrying that we send our kids to get an education and they come out with ideologies that are really, really damaging. And what happens when we get those fantastic teachers who stand up to them? Well, listen to this clip from Calvin Robertson's Common Sense Crusade with the teacher who got sacked.
I was told that I was going to be receiving a new child into my class in a new September term who wanted to identify as a boy, although she was born a girl. And I was very concerned about the effect it might have on this child if I was to affirm her in basically what amounts to a belief that she's born in a wrong body. I didn't want to go along with calling her by the name and pronouns that she was requested, mainly, well, entirely really, because I believe that that's actually quite harmful and psychologically quite damaging for an 8-year-old child.
So I should have said before, she is blurred and her voice changed because she's going through a legal action with the school. But in the interview, it goes on to say, what happens when you raise this, even as a teacher or perhaps parents with the school? And this is really insightful.
Issue is as well that when you try to raise it with a school, you feel as though the leadership in the school are so bought into this ideology or to the principle that we shouldn't offend, we shouldn't cause offence to a child, that could be so damaging, that they can't hear what you're saying. It's as if they can't engage in any other narrative that would try to demonstrate what is really in the best interests of children. And of course, you know that you're going to put your job on the line if you raise this because of the culture that we're in at the moment. And it makes it, I actually do feel for head teachers who are put in this position, because the guidelines from the government are so woolly that they've almost been put in the place of having to make a kind of a decision that really only a doctor should be making.
Teachers, whether like it or not, are being forced to make decisions that only doctors should be making. It's a horrible situation. They should be allowed to teach and not teach this ideology in schools. Our children are really in danger on this. I am a Christian speaking from my worldview that God created man and woman, and that sex is for within the marriage, that there are two gender identities. But as I said at the beginning, I don't think the majority of people in the world sign up to this ideology and would be shocked at what schools are doing. We have to check what our schools are doing. We have to check what our children are being taught. And here I'll finish with this advice from Jordan Peterson in the States, when they're looking at the young men and the lowering of testosterone naturally through boys growing up and not being allowed to be boys. It's actually lowering testosterone. We're becoming more effeminate. And this is what he says about this ideology. And we will get to a point here where we'll start doing this, where we'll have to start doing this.
I would say as well, more specifically, and this is specific advice for parents, if you have your children in a school and they talk about equity, and there's class and they talk about equity, diversity, inclusivity, white privilege, systemic racism, any of that, you take your children out of the class. They're not being educated, they're being indoctrinated. And there's absolutely no excuse for it.
I agree with that completely. You might run out of schools pretty quickly, though, here in this country.
That would be just fine. The sooner the better.
Jordan Peterson, it's hard to express my gratitude to you for telling the truth as you do. Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.